Father, we come before you this evening. We thank you for all the folks gathered here to take time out of their week to study and to understand what you want us to do and how to live. And so we thank you for that opportunity. Grant us, Father, that the Holy Spirit would illuminate us to your word and be able to apply it so we can live it out before you. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so last week I talked about occultic practices that actually open up people to the demonic realm. So I want to go back to and finish up Thyatira, and we were referring to Satan's so-called deep secrets, which she was promoting in the church, and they continue to promote this stuff in the church as well, and we talked about that. Now let me pivot a little bit to how to overcome Rome, because as a believer, you have to overcome Rome, and like I mentioned, it's not just simply leaving the Catholic Church if you were involved in the Catholic Church, like I was. Yeah, that's part of the overcoming, but the overcoming is overcoming the whore of Babylon, really, and what she's trying to attempt to do, not just in the Catholic Church, but in the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, and then the Protestant Church, because she's alive and well in the Protestant Church. So what you're seeing as of the last, 15, 20 years maybe, is a movement in Protestantism to return back to Rome. And this has been happening over time, and trying to say that there's really no such thing as the Protestant Reformation. That was just, it was just all for naught, I guess. I don't know how to think about that, because that was a major split and division in Christianity with the Protestant Reformation. And to say that really doesn't matter, and really we're all unified because we all believe in Jesus, that's absolute heresy. Just because, let me ask you this, just because someone says, I believe in Jesus, that's only half of the equation, okay? Because you have to believe in the work of Jesus too. You have to believe in what he did and who he is. Well, like I've always mentioned, the Catholic Church gets the person of Jesus right, but they don't get the work of Jesus right. They add works to salvation, and therefore, by definition, that's another gospel. It's a false gospel. So when you have these Protestants saying that, we need to unite back to Rome, and a couple of examples of this, you had about 1,000 charismatic pastors said the end of the Reformation had come, and Tony Palmer and Kenneth Copeland, a lot of charismatics were leading that, and there's some of the pictures there with Pope Francis. You have Joel Osteen met with the Pope, and is a huge supporter. I'm like, how much more can Joel Osteen say and do before someone realizes this guy's a false teacher, and yet people just continue to flock to this guy? Or how about Rick Warren? He definitely had a very warm and fuzzy relationship with the Catholics. He partnered with them in his peace plan, and he absolutely endorsed Pope Francis. I was reading that this afternoon just to remind myself of what Rick Warren had said about Pope Francis, and he was like, this guy's like an all-star, he said. I'm paraphrasing, but he was totally endorsing Pope Francis. Hey, Rick, the guy has proven to be nothing but a globalist. The guy has proven to be a flat-out communist Marxist. He hates America. He hates Protestantism. This guy is everything that Christianity goes against. He's for gay marriage. He's for transgenderism. He's for all of that. And I don't understand Rick's movement toward that, other than this is not overcoming the whore of Babylon. And then, of course, so many people follow Rick Warren, or they follow the charismatics, or they follow Joel Osteen. So when these guys put their endorsement on the Pope, so did the thousands of people following them as well. And even Greg Laurie. This is the thing that shocked me about Greg Laurie. He started putting the Catholics infused into his Harvest Crusades. And Franklin Graham was doing the same thing, and Billy Graham was doing the same thing. So that was the knock on them. So so it wasn't just a Greg Laurie thing. Franklin Graham did it. And what do you mean? Well, I worked Franklin Graham's crusade. I saw what happened. And They recruit churches, Protestant, but they also recruit Catholics. Billy Graham was doing that. And they recruit Catholics in there. And, okay, fine, that you're going to invite the Catholics to the crusade, which is fine, because they need to be saved too. I agree. But that's not what they were doing. Because I was on the inside of Franklin Graham's thing, because I worked follow-up on Franklin Graham's crusade that he had in Bakersfield. What they had actually done, which they copied from Billy Graham and implemented, was you have these conversions that happened at the crusade. Okay, so say you had, I don't know, several hundred of them. Okay? So what the Franklin Graham crusade would do, which the Billy Graham crusade would do, was divide up the prospects to the different churches. And some of those prospects were going to Catholic churches for the Catholic Church to follow up on. Now, that's my first question. What are you guys thinking? Why would I take a new convert to Christianity and hand them over to a Catholic priest? You got to be out of your mind to do something like that. And that's what I learned about the Franklin Graham organization. It's not like I don't like Franklin Graham, but the organization just copied what Billy Graham was doing. And this is exactly the heat that Billy Graham and Franklin Graham and now Greg Laurie has on them for giving converts over to the Catholic Church. And I think that's a bad stewardship. I think that's just misguided. I think that leads people into error and heresy. So I'm going to send somebody that just got saved, and you preached a gospel message of faith alone, but I'm going to send them to somebody that teaches them it's not faith alone, it's faith in Jesus plus works. So you took them out of the world and you threw them into a cult. It didn't make any sense to me. And that's, again, Greg Laurie included the Catholics in his Harvest Crusade, and he got a lot of heat for that. And again, that's the questionable thing. What were you thinking? Why do you continue to do this? Is it just because that's how they did it, the Grahams did it, and that's what we do automatically? We just follow that pattern? Greg, did you ever think about the ramifications spiritually and the accountability of you leading people to the Lord and then you just giving them over to the Catholic Church, which goes against why the Protestant Reformation happened in church history? You can't act like the Catholic Church, by its official teachings, is a legitimate organization. You can't say that. By all definitions of official Catholic doctrine, they believe in a works-based salvation. That's it. That makes them a cult. That makes them a false religion. I'm sorry. Look, that's the reality. And I don't understand Protestants going along with this. Because either you believe Jesus was sufficient on the cross or you don't. And if you don't believe he's sufficient, then that would make you gravitate to works. Okay, so there must be something in these people that think that the Catholic Church is okay. I understand the evangelism of Catholics. I totally get that. I don't understand the discipleship of the Catholics. Because they can't disciple anybody. They're going to teach them error. That's why we had the whole Protestant Reformation. I don't understand that. Anyway, guys like Al Mohler and other seminaries were promoting monkish types of activities and methodologies like the Benedictine option. These are coming out of the Desert Fathers, contemplative prayer and contemplative meditation and stuff like that. So here's a guy in the Southern Baptists promoting this. Now, we already know Al Mohler now is saying that you can be born gay, so he's off the wagon, But he was starting to say off the wagon things like that, like promoting the Benedictine option. Look, that's crazy to promote anything a Catholic monk is promoting. Catholic monks are mystics, and they got the mysticism from Eastern meditation and Eastern mystics. That's how they did it. And they started living in this Eastern asceticism of living out in the desert, living in caves and stupid stuff like that, which violated the Great Commission, because if you're going to go live in a cave, then you can't do the Great Commission. You have to be in the world, but you're not of the world. And they said, we're not going to just not be of the world, we're just not going to be in it at all. Well, that's a total violation. And then they went into all this weird, Eastern mysticism, which opened them up, a lot of them, to mystical experiences and weird stuff like that. So when you start seeing evangelical leaders promoting that, you're like, what are you doing? That's crazy. And then, of course, the emergent church movement, which is totally pagan and not on the radar as far as what you would consider Christianity, those guys support the ecumenical movement with the Catholics as well. So what I'm saying is all of this, and I can list more and more, but I think you get the point. The point is, even in Protestantism, there's a desire in some of these people to return back to Rome. I don't know what they're attracted to. Maybe it's the asceticism. Maybe it's the smelling of incense. Maybe it's the tradition. Maybe it's the formality. I don't know what it is. But every time I walk into a Catholic church, I smell deadness. I smell a corpse lying in front of me every time I walk in one of those creepy places. And they are creepy because there are idols everywhere. And so it creeps me out. There's idolatry, and behind idolatry is demonization. And so I don't get it. I don't get it, especially when I lived it and experienced it for myself. And all this is more apostasy. Okay, so the point then is, as a believer, you have to overcome Thyatira. Thyatira is not just simply the Catholic Church, it's the whore of Babylon. And she wants this ecumenical movement of all religions under a supra umbrella of her. And that's why you see these Protestants getting along with the Pope. And that's why even like Rick Warren was involved in Chrislam and saying that, the Muslims worship the same God and stuff like that. And Rick Warren was dead wrong on that stuff. And I don't know why the Southern Baptists didn't kick him out. But they did. But he makes statements like that. And they signed a thing, the Yale document, I think it was, and saying that, Muslims and Christians worship the same God. And it's like, no, we don't. And do not call the Muslims an Abrahamic faith. They're not part of Judaism or Christianity. But anyway, so this is part of the ecumenical movement of the whore of Babylon. And so the progressive left, the religious left of Christianity is all for that. And that's why they gravitate to this more ecumenical stuff. Anyway, that being the case, he says, but hold fast what you have till I come. And obviously that's a reference to the rapture, that he's coming for the church. So he's telling the church, those of you who have not got so deep in this, and those of you who are trying to get out of it, or you haven't fallen for this, will hold fast to the doctrine until I come. So hold fast to correct teachings until I come. That might be hard for some people, but that's the idea, is holding fast is to guard. It means to guard something. And so you are to guard correct doctrine as much as you can. And not just simply guard it, but practice it is the idea, that you don't follow Babylon's ways and let yourself have, by osmosis, incorporate her. You hold and guard correct doctrine, and you live it out until I come. That's the idea, okay? And so he'll come in the rapture. And then here's the reward. And he who overcomes, what all we're talking about with what we discussed, and keeps my works until the end. Well, what is his works? What is Messiah's works? Well, you have to know what his works are, because he's asking you to do them until he comes. And if you do those works, then he will give you power over the nations. So it's important to understand what he's referring to. Is it the works of Rome? Is it the works of a denomination? Is it the works, that you decide on your own what you're going to do? No. The works of Christ are spelled out in the New Testament. It is the things that he wants you to accomplish through his agenda, through his commands, and through his methodologies. So that's important to understand. So it does include doctrine, no doubt about that, and that's a controlling factor. But the doctrine then tells you how he wants you to behave in your morals and values, but then he explains to you what he wants you to do. So like his agenda. So his agenda then sets the table for the work that needs to be done. And that work that you do for him has to have biblical methodologies. You can't incorporate foreign methodologies into your works and what you do. So let me explain this a little bit. So you want to reach people for the Lord, okay? Say you're saying, I want to do the Great Commission. Okay, that's the agenda. You're right on the agenda. But then, so for instance, we talked about Rick Warren. Part of his agenda was incorporating a methodology that came from Peter Drucker. And Peter Drucker got his methodology from communists. And the methodology was the power of a short campaign. And what that meant was that Rick decided to use a methodology in his purpose-driven, church or whatever you want to call it. He started incorporating communistic methodologies. And the communists had figured out that you can't draw things out for too long. In their methodology, you have to have a short campaign. That's fast, it's quick, probably no more than a month long or 40 days. And then they move on to something else. So you rally people for a very short time, hit them pretty hard, and then out of that you'll get a hearing, and then out of that will come people that you can pull out of that hearing to be your core followers. And then that's the core you want to use in your manipulation. You're useful idiots. Okay? So this is the power of a short campaign. I'm going to draw a crowd, then I'm going to have a smaller concentric circle that I'm going to use for useful idiots to do my bidding. Well, all Peter Drucker did is use that and put that into the methodology in growing a church. And said, so what you really need to do is use the power of a short campaign. Out of that, you will draw people to listen, and then out of that, you will get a core group out of that. And you work with concentric circles. That's a communist methodology. So when you see churches, and they probably don't even realize it, churches following Rick Warren's model, and there's plenty of churches in town that actually said, yeah, we're going to do Rick Warren's stuff. We're purpose-driven. There's churches in town that actually said that from the pulpit. They're probably ignorant the fact that Rick Warren's methodology came from communists. That is not how you draw a crowd. That is not how you're supposed to do the Great Commission, by using communistic methodologies. Communist methodologies are very satanic because it's meant to fool people. It's meant to use people as useful idiots. They don't know what's really happening on the inside. They just hear something, okay? So what you started seeing Rick Warren adopt is these, well, we'll do 40 days of purpose in the church, and then we'll move from that to 40 days of prayer was one of them. And then we're going to move to the Daniel diet. We're going to do 40 days of the Daniel diet. And then we're going to do 40 days of whatever. And it was constantly 40 days, 40 days, 40 days. That's straight out of communism. Straight out communism in the methodologies. So these churches that say, I want to do what Rick Warren's doing, because he could gather a crowd, because people want to hear the power of a short campaign. And then they come, and then he draws a group out of that. That's not how the Bible's supposed to be taught. That means that the preacher's going to preach topical. And when the preacher is able to preach topical, he's not anchored to the scripture. He's not anchored to the context. There are times when you preach topical, and sometimes I'll do that, but I'll still exegete a passage. Topical preachers typically speak with random passages all being thrown in. And that was Rick Warren's style. He was just constantly throwing just random different passages together. And to make it all fit, he had to use a ton of different translations to get the right word that he was looking for in the translation. Because he couldn't just use one translation because he couldn't get the wording that he wanted. And so he used a multiplicity of translations to get the right words, to put the right message together, and it was like dozens and dozens of different passages all sandwiched together to make some type of point that he was making. It's completely the most topical message you could possibly get. It wasn't exegeting a passage at all, okay? So that becomes the problem. That's a wrong methodology. The methodology of Scripture, what you see Moses doing, what you see Nehemiah and Ezra doing, or any of the kings of Israel, when they were reading the law, is they took the law and they went verse by verse by verse by verse by verse and taught. That's how they did it. Line upon line, precept upon precept, and you just go down like that within your context. You don't jump all over the place unless you're trying to make a point, but you stay within the particular text that you're supposed to be in and stay in context. Well, that model doesn't do that because if I'm trying to get a message across, the Scripture is probably not going to lend itself to whatever humanistic message I have. And so that's how he played the game. And by the way, there's a lot of churches in town playing that game today too. There's a lot of churches in America playing the game, a lot of churches in the Western society playing the game. That's one example. That's one example of using a wrong methodology. Another wrong methodology comes from the seeker-friendly movement, and probably I would say the church growth movement. But anyway, the seeker-friendly movement inverts the purpose of the church for Sunday morning, Wednesday night, or whatever. So when the church is gathered or called together, whatever day the church decides to worship on, the primary emphasis of the church is to be for the edification of the saints so they can do the work of ministry. That's clearly spelled out in Ephesians chapter 4. So that's the church's purpose. The church's purpose then for evangelism is to go and tell. So the training happens here, happens on a Wednesday night, happens on a Sunday night. So the training of believers happens here, which means that the pastor is supposed to feed the sheep, not milk, but steak, solid food, as Paul would say, or the writer of Hebrews would say solid food. And then they go out and they do the work of ministry outside. They do the Great Commission out there. It's go and tell. And I think everyone in this room kind of understands it. But what happens is subtly, a lot of people are ignorant of the purpose of the church. Sunday morning is not for evangelism. Even though at the end of my sermon I will give an evangelism a point to people who haven't come to faith, but it's not for evangelism. Neither is Wednesday night. I'm not evangelizing here. I'm actually discipling. I expect you to be discipled and go out and evangelize. But I'm not turning the church upside down and invert it to where Sunday morning and Wednesday night is simply evangelism services. That's wrong. And that's what the church growth movement and the seeker-friendly movement did. It's not the correct methodology. Can someone get saved coming to church on Sunday? Of course. Anyone that hears the truth can get saved. And I'm going to give a gospel presentation at the end, in my prayer. But if you come to a church and for 52 Sundays, all they say is how to be saved, and they always give a gospel, and they always, the text is always centered around getting saved. Whatever passage they use, it's always salvation-centric, okay? Well, what happens, you do the math. What happens if I do that 52 Sundays out of the year? What happens to believers who have heard the gospel 52 times every Sunday? It's the same message. They get tired of it. They get bored. Number three, they don't grow. Okay? But here's over time, this is funny. I've had people come to our church, and because we're discipleship-oriented, I could tell they've been to a gospel-centric church where the message is a salvation message every Sunday. And the guy goes, when are you going to preach the gospel? I said, I just did. I said, I did. When I closed in prayer, I preached the gospel. I said, I don't need a whole sermon to do that. Jesus gives everlasting life, and he proves it by the death, burial, and resurrection, and he offers everlasting life to anyone who believes. That's the gospel. I do it every Sunday, but my message is going to be for believers. I'm not giving messages so you learn how to be saved for the 52nd time. That's ridiculous. But I could tell he came from an environment like that every Sunday they thought they were doing good by turning their program into an evangelism program on Sunday morning. Well, what that does is create shallowness among the believers. And they never really grow. And so there's been churches, believe it or not, that have said, if you're saved, we're not the right church for you. That's Elevation Church, Stephen Furtick. Okay? So people have said that. This is how crazy the thinking is, okay? But you still have churches in town that are turning their services into an evangelism crusade every Sunday morning. Okay? So you do that, okay? And the people just sit there and take it because they like the music, they like to smoke, and you know, they don't have a problem. It's just death, burial, and resurrection, death, burial, and resurrection, death, burial, and resurrection, death, burial. They don't talk politics about what's going on in the world. They don't talk prophecy or anything like that. So then what happens is you can have, I already know this, I can vouch for this. You can have people that are teachers, leftist, flat-out, radical left teachers, sitting in that pew who are for abortion, for gay marriage, for transgenderism, for grooming of kids. I mean, just as leftist as all get out, sitting there with a smile every Sunday in that church in Bakersfield. Because that's what that pastor has said he's going to do. He's going to use the Rick Warren model, and that's how people can sit there and be as radically left as you possibly can, and never once are they ever told anything convicting. They're just told the gospel every Sunday morning. Do you see the problem with that? If a radical leftist could be comfortable at Rock Harbor, then I have a problem. Then I'm not doing my job. And I know it's not that I have to harp on, hey, today we're going to preach against transgenderism. It's not that. It's that the Scripture will lend itself to making that application. The principles will lend itself to what's going on in the culture. And either the pastor is not wanting to do it, which is typically the reason, or he's too ignorant of it, one of the two. But either way, you invert the church to be an evangelistic crusade. That's the wrong methodology, because you're not discipling. When he commissioned Peter back and he restored Peter, do you remember what he said? Commissioned him 3 times. Remember, because he denied him 3 times. Do you remember that? So let me read it for you. And I wish every pastor would realize what he's saying here. So he restores Peter at the Sea of Galilee. You remember that? And he was cooking breakfast for them, and they come off the boat. Okay. Simon Bar-Jonah, do you love me more than these? And the these is the disciples, because he said he loved Jesus more than any of the disciples and would die for him. So he says this. He said to him, yes, Lord, you know I love you, and it's not agape, it's phileo. He said to him, feed my lambs. Okay, so the first rattle out of the box is feed my lambs. Lambs are young people in the faith. So the pastor has to feed them. Okay, so there's elements in a pastor's sermon that are for lambs, like everyone will get it, but then there's other aspects to it. So you can't just stay at the lamb level, right? Then he asked him, Simon Bar-Jonah, do you love me? He said, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Phileo. He said to him, tend my sheep. Tend my sheep. So now we went from a lamb to a sheep, a mature believer. And he says, tend them. So he's like, oversee them, bishop them, be their leader and guide them in the right path. Okay? Well, the only way you can guide is you have to point out to the sheep where not to go. You have to guide them from where the wolves are, or where bears are, or where anything can get them, or holes where they can get caught up, a fence they can get caught up in. So the idea of tending the sheep has to do with, you better warn them. You better give them a heads up about what's happening. Don't let them wander off, is the idea. Well, that's not being done. That's clear. And then the last one is, he says, do you love me again? He says, Lord, you know all things. You know I love you. I mean, Jesus said, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. So you feed the lambs, give basic stuff sometimes in your sermons, tend them and guard them, the sheep, and then feed the sheep. Okay? Feeding the sheep means I'm responsible for the maturity of the sheep. So I have to move them from milk to solid food, to writer of Hebrews. That's what the pastor's supposed to do. So there will be elements even in my sermons where it will be baseline, but then you'll notice then I'll move to high fruit in my sermons. And I'll go and pick the high fruit, and that's for the sheep. So I'm sometimes going back and forth as I create my lessons. I'm going back and forth, making sure both are handled. And then the third element of guarding is involved in my sermon. Because usually I will point out, if you notice, watch out for this. This is going on. That's happening. That's me guarding. So all three elements have to be involved in the sermon. Now ask yourself this. If you go to a Rick Warren model sermon, will you hear all three elements? No. In the church growth movement and the secret friend, you will only hear feed my lambs. But they will not do the other two. They won't feed the sheep and they won't tend the sheep. It's always feeding lambs, feeding lambs. And dude, I can tell you this, what most people are getting at the churches here in Bakersfield and across the nation is probably a second grade level of Bible study. That's how bad it is. Because I can gauge what they're saying based on the level of theology. I know where they should be. They shouldn't be there. At Rock Harbor, what I have set it at, and I can go lower, I can go higher, but where I have set it at is first-year Bible college. That's where I have set the bar at Rock Harbor. If I go to a little bit too much more, I'll lose people, and I don't want to go down, so I want to stay at first-level Bible college. That's where I'm teaching at. That's where I intentionally decided to teach, okay? But they're making a decision, and I know they are, to stay at the second grade level. That's a problem. That's a wrong methodology. As I've pointed out, the methodology is spelled out to Peter in John chapter 21 of how you're supposed to teach and preach, and they're not doing that. So my point is, going back to this, you have Christ's agenda, but you got to make sure that you're doing the right things on the agenda. You have to do it his way. You can't do it your way. You can't do it Rick Warren's way. You can't do it Peter Drucker's way, or a communist way, or a Marxist way, or whatever way you decide to do it. I don't know. You know, I think one of the biggest problems that churches have is how they go about raising money. Look, the way you're supposed to raise money is you tell the congregation the need, and they respond. If they don't respond, then too bad. The problem is, guys don't settle for that. That's the pattern in Scripture. Tell the need and let the people respond. That's it. Okay? But you go to churches, and what ends up happening is they're twisting blood out of people's nose. They invite them to their house. They're inviting them to dinner, taking them on trips, doing all kinds of things to finagle money out of them. Okay? And that's wrong. That's wrong methodology. You shouldn't have to force somebody to give to you. That's ham-fisted. That's humanistic. Does it work? Yes, it works. But just because it's pragmatic doesn't mean it's sanctioned by God. So yeah, you know, I know how the methodology goes because I've been a part of that stuff and I've seen it. You get the 100 most wealthiest people in the church, and you take them to dinner, and you coax them into giving you money. That's how it works. That's what they're doing, just to let you know. In my previous ministry, I was given a list of 100 people. Call these people and recruit them. Who are they? The 100 top givers of the church. That's how I know. That's how I know. Now, we don't do those kinds of things at Rock Harbor. I don't know what anyone gives intentionally, because that kind of stuff happens. But at other churches, do they know what people give? Absolutely, they know what people give. I don't. I don't know any of what people give. I could care less, because I was part of a system that knew what people gave. And those people were treated very differently. It's a violation of James, right? Giving the best seats in the house to the people. Look, I know it. They can't lie and say it didn't happen, because it did. And quite frankly, most of the churches here in town are doing the same thing. It's all about nickels and noses. It's all what it comes down to. And here's what happens. The stupid churches overextend themselves on their buildings. That's what happens. They build cathedrals instead of what's useful. They're not content in building a metal building. They want monuments to themselves. When they die, they want that monument and the name on the monument. And because of that, things cost triple or quadruple the price. And if we're going to have marble tile counters in the bathroom, then we're going to have marble tiles in the bathroom. And they'll buy it. And they'll twist people's arms to get it. Saw it. Not hypothetical. Not hypothetical. We're going to say we're going to spend $200,000 remodeling, and it ended up costing $700,000. Are you going to go back to the people and say, we overspent by $500,000? Are you going to tell the people that? Because you didn't. And it didn't work, because no young people came. And they didn't come. I know, I was there, saw it. You can't use humanistic methodologies in getting money out of people. You are going to have to account for that. That is the lowest of the lowest when you stoop to that level. Oh, can you get results? Yes, you can get results. But at the end, when you stand before the bema seat, that's burned up because you did it the wrong methodology. We don't call up people and asking for donations that are living in sin. We don't do that. That's wrong. I would think anyone in this room would say that's wrong. We don't call up somebody that's left his wife for another man and ask him for money. Would you do that? No. I wouldn't think so. Would a pastor do that? Why are you different than the pastor? I'm just saying. Look, I'm letting you on the inside of what's going on in these churches. This is why we're different. Because this is the kind of junk they do. This is the kind of games they play, especially with the money. The funny business with the money is always there. Okay, it's always lurking around there. Used to have people, not here at Rock Harbor, but the previous church, walk in the church. Oh, I got $70,000. I want to give this to the church. $70,000. And I want to say, hey, buddy, you're not supposed to let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. You need to shut up. But why would he go in the office waving a check for $70,000? Because in that environment, money talks. That's why. Let me go to another level. Go to Creflo Dollar. Go to Jesse Duplantis. Go to Kenneth Copeland. What are the people thinking when they go in front of the people saying, I need to fly a $65 million jet because I do not want to ride in a tube full of demons? Because here's what happened. In all those situations, they bought the guy a $65 million jet to fly in, so they didn't have to fly in a tube full of demons. So it worked, by the way. It worked. I mean, Creflo Dollars had, give to whatever cause he's doing, and he says, don't you come up here and give him anything less than a $100 bill. So people flooding up there, throwing down hundreds all over the place. So when you look at this, it's more than what meets the eye. You have to have the agenda. You have to have the right methodologies to do Messiah's work correctly. Okay? That's the key right there. Until the end. And if you do it correctly, and you overcome this, because money is a real issue in Babylon, by the way. Let me ask you this. Who's the richest religion on the face of the planet? The Catholic Church. In fact, we don't even know the amount of wealth they have because they have priceless valuables in their vaults. Priceless. That you can't calculate. Okay? And so they are the richest organization on the planet, by the way. Oh, do you ever read church history of how the Catholic Church got their money? Yeah, it was pretty much the same thing, okay, that I've been talking about. So you see what happens here. The Babylonian system is all about money. How do I know that? Well, read Revelation 17 and 18. Who is doing deals with the whore? For her what? Her luxuries. Right? The merchants of the world and the kings of the world are sleeping with her because she gives them money. That's how they tempt her. That's what Revelation 17 and 18 are saying, right? The whore is making them fornicate through her luxury items, that what she can give them. So there's money in religion, false religion, and that's why you see with the Catholic Church, there's a lot of money involved in that. And then in the Protestant, the same thing is true. They mess around with money, right? It's always there. So if you overcome all of this and this Babylonian concept, these concepts that are happening, I will give them power over the nations. So this is the concept of you have no power now, because if you're not going to play the game with the whore of Babylon, then you will come out the losing end in this world. You will have no power whatsoever. You will not have any money, you will not have any status, and you definitely won't have any power. So the reason these politicians are playing a game with her is for power and money. That's what it's about. So like at the conference, and Carl Teichried pointed this out very, very well. If you think that these political positions and policies are coming from and originating from a political mindset, you're wrong. It's actually coming out of the World Council of Churches. It's coming out of the globalist religion where no borders is coming, where globalism is coming. All this other stuff that you think is political, it's actually not. As Carl pointed out, it's all stemming from pagan Babylonian religion. All of it comes from that. And so if you don't play the game, let's say you're going to go into politics, okay? Let's pretend you're going to go into politics. Well, if you go into politics, you better have some money, because the only way you're going to be able to go in politics is if you play the game. Because if you don't have your own money like Trump does, then you're beholden to the system. And the system, whether it's Republican or Democrat, has the power over you because they have the purse strings. So they will tell you what you will do and how you will vote, or whoever will in the system. So what you realize is, well, I'm not going to do that. Well, then you better, if you don't have any money, you better not run, because you're not going to make it. You better be a multimillionaire or a billionaire if you're planning to do anything in politics. Otherwise, you will at some point have to compromise with the system. That's what they all do, unless they have outside sources. And that goes Republican and Democrat. And look, you can talk to anybody in this room that knows what's going on in the Republican Party here, and what's going on in the Republican Party here is going on in the Democratic Party here as well. Same thing. And everybody that's involved in that knows exactly what I'm talking about, and you know who the power brokers are here in Kern County. Okay? And if you go against that power broker, you're not getting in. It's just the way it works. It's the way it works. There's a kingmaker in Kern County. So the idea then is, he says, I'm going to give you power, because you know why? When you decide, I'm not going to play the game, I'm not going to play the game at work. I'm not going to play the game in my government. I'm not going to play the game at my church. I'm going to do it straight up. Then you won't have power in this world. But what he is saying, I will give you power in the next. You will be in charge in the next world. You won't be in charge in this world, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be on the low end of the totem pole. You won't be a power broker, okay? But in the next world, I promise you, you'll have power over the nations. That's when you can rule and reign. And then he quotes Psalm 2:9. He shall rule them with a rod of iron. They shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessel. So again, that's a messianic psalm referring to Jesus, obviously, when he rules and reigns in the messianic kingdom. And that rule and reign is the iron rule, right? And the idea is it's pretty strict. And the idea is, how strict is it? That rod of iron, it would be like when he has to correct something, and he will, it would be like you taking a rod of iron and hitting a clay pot with that and breaking it all into pieces. That's how severe the rule will be when Jesus rules and reigns in the 1,000-year reign. Okay. And he's including us in that rule and reign, that rod of iron rule, that dashes pottery into nothing. What is that? Well, it's an absolute monarch rule by God himself through the Messiah, right? It's an absolute rule, and it doesn't allow for any mischief, nonsense, sin, or anything outward manifestations of unholiness or unrighteousness whatsoever. Well, in order to do that, the rod then is stern. It puts things down immediately, and you and I play a part in that. You and I will put down things. We will stop things from happening. We will not let, Venezuela gangs take over an apartment complex. That won't happen, right? Or we won't let Haitians start eating cats and killing the geese at the pond because that's what they do in Haiti. That won't happen, okay? Because you are playing a part in that. And it's a very stern rule. A lot of people are not used to that. But again, think about this. You and I will rule with them as immortals. We will be glorified, okay? So we can't sin. We don't have a sin nature. We don't sleep. We don't eat. We don't need any of that. So we make the perfect vice regents for him, okay? But who are we ruling then? You're ruling the mortals that come through the tribulation. Both, if you're a Gentile, it will be over Gentiles. If you're Jewish, it'll be over Jewish people. But you'll be ruling over the mortals. But the mortals still have their sin nature. They come in saved, but they still have a sin nature. Then they have babies and children, and those children and babies grow up, and they have sin natures, and they have to be corralled. Because the rod of iron rule is working. So there's where you play your part, is you keep things in check. Now, at the end, he lets Satan loose and reveals the hearts of the individuals, and they rebel against him. But for 1,000 years, they're in check, and you're checking them. So So let me scratch the itch a little bit, because a lot of people don't gravitate to something like this. They're like, well, I don't know, that doesn't sound too appealing. It does in this sense. If you have always been at the mercy of unjust rulers and having very little say in what happens to your life, whether that's a president, whether that's a governor, whether that's a mayor, whether that's a boss, whether that's whatever authority structure that you had in your life or have right now, and you're like, yeah, it stunk. I don't like it. I don't like what's happening to our country. I don't like what's happening to the state of California. I don't like what's happening here in Bakersfield. And you have this constant churning inside of you that you are sick and tired of the leaders you have. Well, someday he's saying, yeah, I know. One day you'll lead. And you'll lead righteously and holy, and you won't do what they're doing. And so it's trying to scratch the itch in this reward of those of us, Christians, who have had to submit to bad leadership all our lives. All our lives. I mean, count on your finger how many really good people, leaders you had in your life. Dude, it's like you could, on one hand maybe, on one hand. But think, I mean, you could probably go endless on how many bad leaders you had that were in your life, whether it's professors. I mean, all of my professors were horrible. I mean, so there were no good leaders there. I would say 80 to 90% of my coaches in athletics were just terrible, horrible guys, scums of the earth, right? I had a couple good coaches, especially in college, and that was it. The rest of them were scumbags. They're just scumbags. Yeah, that's what happens when you get in athletics. Most of the people that play athletics, they're just scumbags, man. The coaches and stuff, even the players are scumbags. I'm sorry, I'm just telling you, there's good guys. I'm not saying that. There are good guys, but most people in athletics are scumbags. They're not saved. What do you expect? Let me ask you this. Are most people good people in your industry? They're scumbags, right? Talk to anybody that's in contracting here. How many contractors do you know are scumbags? I mean, it is the fact of life. And I'm saying there's not good people, but, it's just what it is. There's good people, and then there's bad people. And unfortunately, in every industry or whatever you're involved in, the majority of them are scumbags. Okay? Now, we all know there's good teachers, right? But what's the majority of them? Radical leftists. Right? I mean, in any industry. But so the point, when you start flushing this out and start trying to apply it, you realize, yeah, man, my whole life, I've had to deal with the IRS, I've dealt with accountants that are bad, I've dealt with lawyers that are bad. Oh man, those are scumbags, right? Just absolute scumbags. And yes, I know there are exceptions to the rule, but they're called sharks for a reason, right? So that's my point. If you've ever dealt with somebody that has authority over you, most of the time they're scumbags. And you're like, I can't believe this guy is calling the shots for me. I can't believe like Gavin Newsom, the biggest scumbag on the planet, is calling the shots for me on my economics. That ticks me off. So what I'm trying to get at is, I don't want you to pass this over and say, yeah, that's rule and reign with Messiah. No. It gets at the issue of you dealing with bad authority and saying one day you will be part of the authority and the authority will be good. So that's what you have to look forward to. So this gives you the ability to tolerate the junk authority in your life. As bad as it is and hard as it is, right? But one day you'll be over them, even if maybe a lot of them won't even be there. As I also have received from my Father, and I will give them the morning star. Well, that's interesting. What's the morning star? And then, of course, it ends, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And that's the way it ends with all the 7 churches is, if you want to hear this and apply it, then that's up to you, but you have the free will to reject this. But what is this other thing? So I understand the ruling and reigning, so you'll have a peace in the Messianic kingdom if you're faithful in overcoming all of this, of ruling and reigning in a particular section of society over the nations, and you'll be granted that rule and reign if you can overcome this. Okay, but what is the morning star? I will give him the morning star. This is the morning star. This is the illusion. So this is Venus. So Venus will appear right before the sun comes up. And so this was called in the ancient world the morning star, but it's Venus. So Venus will shine really bright right before the sun comes up, okay? So what the biblical writers did is they took this morning star, Venus, and they attached it to the Messiah. And that became one of the nomenclatures for the Messiah, that Messiah is the morning star. Well, why? Why is Jesus called the morning star? And he even calls himself in Revelation 22 the morning star. I am the bright and morning star. Well, this is interesting, but it has to do with the drama that plays out. in the book of Revelation and with the end times. So, as you can see, Venus will appear in the night sky right before dawn. Okay? So what you have here is a bright star appearing at night, and then it appears right before a new day, is the idea. So it has an eschatological flavor to it. So obviously Jesus is the morning star. What is the night? Well, he said this in the Gospels, night is coming and no one can work. So when he's the light of the world, right? So when he's gone, it's night. And the ultimate night for Israel will be the tribulation. That is the time of darkness. Okay, so when he's here, he's the light. When he's not here, it's dark. Okay, we have to reflect that light, right? But he's not here. So the tribulation is the ultimate darkness. It's the time of gloominess, the time of Jacob's trouble, all this stuff. But it's given the terms darkness, gloominess, and night, okay? So then his appearance in the Shekinah glory is a reference to the star, is the brightness of the star. At the first coming, he didn't show his Shekinah glory. He veiled it, right? He showed it at the Mount of Transfiguration, right? And the disciples, the three of them, saw that. But when he comes back, he said, what will be the sign of your return? What did he say? And you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of glory. That's the idea of the Shekinah. So when I come back the second time, it will be as lightning comes from the east to the west. Everyone will see it, including those in hell. And I will have the Shekinah glory with me, my glory as being God with me. That will be the sign of that I'm coming back. And so the star reference to the morning star is a reference to the Shekinah of Messiah. Okay, so he's the Shekinah glory. And he comes back at night to rescue Israel, right? And destroy the Antichrist, destroy the armies of Antichrist, destroy all evil, purge all evil from the planet, and then prepares the world for what? The new day. What is the new day? It's the Messianic kingdom. That's why it'll say he's the Son of Righteousness, because the sun rises and he has healing in his wings when he rises. So when that new day rises, he brings healing. He brings healing to the world. He brings healing to Israel. He brings healing to the Gentiles and all of us. So the picture of the bright and morning star is Jesus in the Shekinah glory coming at the second coming to rescue Israel. The night is an extenuation from night is coming when no one can work from then till the tribulation. And the new day that's going to dawn is the Messianic kingdom. That's what the morning star. But you still haven't got to it, though. I will give you the morning star. What does that mean? Well, it perhaps suggests an intimacy with him. Perhaps. And again, those who rule and reign are special. Not every Christian will rule and reign. These are the very special ones that overcame all of this. And as you can see, many Christian leaders, even in Protestant circles, were not able to overcome this. They weren't able to overcome Babylon. Babylon got into their Protestant churches. Okay? So those who will overcome this get a special intimacy with Messiah during the Messianic age and for all eternity, which totally makes sense, because those who are closest to him do his good works, do what he wants them to do, stay on his agenda. Of course, that totally makes sense. They're the ones that are most intimate with him now. They're the ones being the most obedient to him now. So, of course, the reward would be more intimacy later. And that would mean also less intimacy for those in eternity who didn't overcome. Now, they're there. They have a certain level of intimacy, but they don't have the intimacy of those who rule and reign with the Messiah. That's the idea of the reward. It's more intimacy. Furthermore, there could be another reference it's making that those who have this most intimacy with Jesus shine the brightest. because they reflect the glory of the morning star. The morning star, obviously a reference to the Shekinah glory. Therefore, those of us who get this reward and have this intimacy will shine brighter than other believers, which the shining is a reflection of the glory of Christ. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever, Daniel relates. So notice, those who are wise and those who turn many to righteousness will be able to shine brighter than everything. Jesus said this in Matthew 13:43, then righteousness will shine forth, the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. So there's the idea of shining. Now, here's the thing. I can't fully understand this, but I do know this from what I can apprehend. I may not comprehend all this, but apparently in heaven, in the spiritual realm, in the kingdom, and eternity, okay? When you have the spiritual realm there, the collateral in the spiritual realm is a lot different than it is here. The way you know someone's position in heaven, the way you know their privilege, the way you know their responsibility, the way you know their intimacy is, number one, how close are they to the throne? And number two, how brightly do they shine? Because the brighter they shine, the more reflection of the Shekinah glory, which all creatures, including Satan, wanted. They want that light. That's God's light. And then as a reward, you're giving the reflection of that light off of you. You don't possess the light, but you reflect it off of you based on that reward. And those who shine the most and reflect the Shekinah the most are known in heaven as higher in position, higher in rank, higher in responsibility, higher in intimacy, and closer to the throne in proximity. And in that situation, that is the collateral of heaven, is those who shine the most. Now, to me and you, it doesn't make a difference if we shine here. You know, a firefly could shine, and you're like, what's the big deal? But in that realm, it's saying you're going to want this. You're going to want to have this Shekinah reflected off of you, or the God's light reflecting off of you, because this will be for all eternity. And once it's set, it's set. You get into the kingdom, obviously, by faith in the Lord, but this is a whole different ballgame that I'm talking about. This is rewards. And whether or not you reflect that Shekinah glory is determined by what you're doing right now if you're overcoming Babylon. And you have to overcome it the rest of your life to get this reward. It's a biggie. So with that being said, I think that's my best attempt to try to explain that.